Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, the 8-1 rout that the Oilers put on the Florida Panthers as they force a Game 5 in Sunrise, Florida tomorrow. We also talked about the NBA Finals. We talked about the Mavericks' own rout of the Boston Celtics that forced a Game 5 tonight in Boston. We talked about predictions for that. I picked the Boston Celtics to close out the series there. And we also talked about the NBA Finals. Who is favored to win it? Who I think should win it? And the way that this series is interesting in the NBA Finals compared to a lot of other years. We are going to finish off our show today here talking about some baseball. So we're going to talk about two different baseball stories, starting off with something that is very interesting to me, the standings right now. And I know standings are kind of boring, but stick around with me here just a little bit because this is a really weird part of baseball right now. They just added a third wild card, and in the NL specifically, there are 7 teams that are within 1.5 games of that third wild card spot. So we'll talk about what that race might play out at as we reach the halfway point really soon here in the MLB season. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to ask, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some baseball coverage here. Very excited. I'm going to talk a little bit about the NL wildcard race. And I did a little bit in that intro right there of a preview for you of where we're going to go. But if you look at where we are in the NL wildcard race specifically, and really all over the MLB, it is insanely close. There are, I believe, 14 teams that are within 3 games of each other in the AL and NL, between 31 and 35 wins. That kind of range right there. There's like 14 teams that are right in that range. But if we go to the wild card right now, and we talk from wild card 2, the Braves in the NL have wild card 1. They're 4 games up on the on wild card 3, right? But the St. Louis Cardinals are at wild card 2 right now. They are half a game up on wild card 3. Wild card 3, there's a tie between the Padres and the Washington Nationals, which is insane. Nobody would have guessed that the Nationals, halfway through the season, at 35 and 36, are in the race for the NL wildcard, in the race for the playoffs. That is 3 teams within half a game. The Arizona Diamondbacks and the San Francisco Giants are half a game back of the Nationals and the Padres. That is 5 teams within 1 game, right? Then we get the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds, which are 1 game back of the third wild card, half a game back of the previous, and 1.5 back of that second wild card. That is 7 teams. And you know what? We can go one step further. The Chicago Cubs and the New York Mets are 1.5 game back of the Nats and the Padres, 2 games back of the Cardinals. That is 9 teams. 9 teams that are battling for 2 spots that are all within 2 games of each other. That is going to be a super fun race as we get down the stretch of the season. And like I said, this is not like we're in the beginning of the season. We are almost halfway through the year right now. We're right around game 72 for these teams, so we are racing towards halfway point. Halfway point is 81. We are almost there. Halfway point is in our sights, and there are 9 teams. 9. That is almost all of the fingers I have that are right on the cusp of the playoffs in the NL. And that is the way that really the entirety of baseball has been. You know, outside of those 9 teams, there are only 2 teams in the NL that are all but eliminated from playoff contention. You know, that being the Rockies and the Marlins. And if we go look at the AL, well, it's not quite as close. You know, outside of the bottom three teams, every single team in the AL has a chance of making those wild card. We'll walk through that. The Angels, the Angels, the A's, and the White Sox are all but out at this point. Houston, Texas, and Tampa are 6 to 7 games back, while Boston, Toronto, and Detroit are 3 to 5 games back, right? There are lots of tight races as we continue. And this is the way the MLB has been. Really is a really interesting kind of way that the MLB has been this season, because you have a clear bottom five teams, right? You have a clear Colorado, Miami, Chicago, White Sox, Oakland, and Los Angeles Angels at the bottom, and you have a top. You have a clear top tier of teams with the Orioles, the Yankees, the Phillies, and the Guardians. These are clear top teams. You can throw the Royals in there if you want, but every other team, right? That's all but like 10 teams are in this middle pack, and really anything can happen. It is going to be a wild race for these wild cards, especially wild cards 2 and 3 in both of these conferences. But getting back to the NL, because I think it's going to be a little more of a crapshoot there. We're already seeing a little bit of separation there in the AL. You have teams that kind of have no business being in this mix. I already talked about the Washington Nationals. They are tied for that third wild card right now with the San Diego Padres. The Nationals have no business being up there. They have punted on this year, basically. They've given up on everything that they're trying to do this season. They are not, really competing that hard this season. This is not something that they said, all right, you know what, we're in it. We're going for it. They have the number one prospect in baseball on a bunch of people's rankings, James Wood, ready to come up. If they were serious about making a playoff run, he would have been up at the beginning of this season. Their pitching staff, they've called up a lot of guys. I've got a little bit more information here as a Nats fan, following them a little closer than a lot of other teams. But DJ Hurst just comes out, throws 13 strikeouts in 6 innings. Not just in 6 innings, but he does it in 84 pitches. That is insane efficiency out of a guy who, that's just his third start ever in the big leagues. Mitchell Parker, we talked a little bit about him at the beginning of the season. He came up in the second week of the season. He has not given up more than 3 runs in any start so far this season. He has been great. Trevor Williams goes on the IL. He's having a career year. Mackenzie Gore, for the Washington Nationals, the guys who are supposed to be the ace, has been number 4 for this team, right? And he's been great. Jake Irvin has been great for this team. That pitching staff has been incredible for the Washington Nationals. And these teams that they're competing with, Arizona, they were in the World Series last season. Cincinnati has this huge upswell of young talent coming through their system right now, led by Ellie De La Cruz. Pittsburgh has Paul Skeens. Chicago is kind of in a weird spot where they were starting really good and kind of have been on a schneid lately. The Mets have won 5 straight now. The Padres, Tatis is on a tear. They have this lineup that on paper should be among the best. And the Cardinals also started slow. They have been one of the better teams in these last couple months of baseball. The amount of parity that's going on in the NL and the amount of shakeup, if it stays this close, it's going to be insane scenarios as we get down to the last month of the season. Now, it's still pre-All-Star game, so it's tough, but you're starting to see these standings take form, and there's so many teams, especially in the NL, that are so close to that wild card spot. The trade deadline is going to be messy. A lot of these teams are teams that are supposed to trade guys. Again, Nationals, Mets, they're supposed to be sellers at the deadline right now, but they're so close to the playoffs. Are they going to be sellers? Are they going to sell off all their best assets? They're so close. Maybe they reload next year and make a run at it. What's going to happen in the AL? What is the deadline going to look like? These are the kind of dominoes that are starting to take shape right now, starting to fall as we get closer and closer to the deadline, just about a month away. It's going to be a very interesting, and I think this is going to be a very tight deadline. And what I mean by that is there's not going to be any big trade. There's not going to be uh, a huge move because all of these teams are kind of grouped together, and some of them that are grouped here are probably going to sell. I expect the Nats to sell a little bit, but still, it's going to be a really interesting trade deadline. And we'll keep an eye on all of this as we get closer to the deadline, as we get closer to the All-Star break. But it's just going to be really interesting. 9 teams within 2 games of the second wild card all together. That is insane. It's going to be a lot of fun. Baseball's going to be a lot of fun this summer, and we're going to start to shift our focus a little more towards baseball as the show starts to hit the dog days of summer, and NBA and NHL and their finals and playoffs. But excited for more of that. We are going to finish off our show today with some more baseball. Talk a little bit about the Dodgers. They had a rough weekend. They lost 2 big stars. They won a couple games, but they lost 2 big stars. We'll talk about who they were, what that means for the future of this organization, not just for this year, but for next year, and what the timetable is looking like on those guys to return. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.